I'm Casey Kasem. As a member of the English group Genesis, Phil Collins has hit the top 40 with Follow You, Follow Me, and Misunderstanding. This week, Phil Collins is in the countdown with his first solo hit, debuting at number 35, I Missed Again.
So you finally came right, I missed again.
Phil Collins on American Top 40 with survey song number 35. It debuts. He produced it, and he wrote it, and he sang it. I Missed Again.
The hits from coast to coast.
Radio plays them, record stores sell them, Billboard ranks them, and AT40 counts them down. If you were colorblind, you wouldn't pursue a career as an interior decorator, would you? And if you had two left feet, you wouldn't try to become a professional dancer, right? Well, let me tell you the story of the hopeful teenage musician who was cursed with a musical handicap, an inability to read music. But that didn't even slow him down. This is the life story, in a nutshell, of the multi-talented Englishman Phil Collins, drummer and lead singer of the group Genesis. Phil says he began playing drums in his early teens. He got real good at it, so his parents sent him to a music school. He says, when I was 14, they sent me to learn to read sheet music. But my capacity for reading wasn't anywhere near as good as actually playing by instinct. I was getting very discouraged and felt like quitting. I'd have this chart in front of me, and my teacher would have me play it, and I'd play very haltingly. I'd make him play it for me, and then I'd say, "Oh, you mean that?" and I'd repeat it perfectly. So I decided to abandon the idea of written music and live by my wits. Even today, if you hum me a melody, I can play it. Write it down, and you've got the wrong bloke. End of quote. Well, using that instinct and his wits, Phil became a very right bloke as lead singer of the group Genesis, as a record producer too, and as a solo singer. His fifth top 40 solo hit climbs 4 notches this week to number 3, Against All Odds. Here's Phil Collins.
How can I just let you walk away?
Against All Odds. Phil Collins on American Top 40. He moves from number 7 to number 3 in popularity.
Casey's Coast to Coast to Coast.
Holding down the American Top 40 fort for Casey, I'm Charlie Van Dyke. Now, we're up to the latest solo hit by English rock star Phil Collins. A song he recorded, you might say, under marital circumstances. This song, and the whole album it comes from, were recorded by Phil in the bedroom of his home in Guildford, England, during his honeymoon. Last year, Phil Collins and his fiancée, Jill Tavelman, were getting ready for the big day. Well, shortly before the wedding date, Phil's duet with Philip Bailey called Easy Lover became a smash hit. And to take advantage of the song's success, Phil Collins' record company told him they wanted a solo album from him. And they wanted it as soon as possible. Well, instead of commuting between his home and a London studio 50 miles away, Phil quickly set up a studio in his house in the biggest room, the master bedroom. At the same time, Phil and Jill got married right on schedule and had to move into a guest room next to the master bedroom, which was now a recording studio. And Phil got right to work on the album, putting in 16-hour days, which meant he and his backup musicians worked way into the night. Well, the new Mrs. Collins had planned quite a different honeymoon. She said, quote, "Imagine trying to sleep with a drummer banging away in the next room. And it was even worse when Phil would sing." End of quote. Well, Jill and Phil Collins' brand new marriage survived the recording of this album, an album called No Jacket Required, which recently hit number 1 on Billboard's album chart. And the first single from this album also hit number 1. That was One More Night. The second single from it is at number 17 this week. Here's Phil Collins with another hit song he recorded during his honeymoon, Sussudio. That's newlywed Phil Collins. So far, his number 1 album, No Jacket Required, has produced 2 hits. The number 1 song, One More Night, and the song at number 17 this week, Sussudio.
Now, we're up to the latest hit by a man who recently entered the history books with a double performance that's never been done before. Just a few weeks ago, on July 13th, English rock star Phil Collins was among the dozens of rock stars who took part in an historic event, the Live Aid concerts in London and Philadelphia. And of all those many rock greats, Phil was the only one to perform on stage at both concerts. First in London at Wembley Stadium, then in Philadelphia at John F. Kennedy Stadium. both in the same day. And all it took was his willingness to suffer jet lag. At Wembley, Phil sang his number one song Against All Odds and played piano and drums and sang with Sting of the Police. Then, when he finished his time on stage in London, Phil hopped into a waiting limousine, sped to Heathrow Airport, hopped on a Concorde supersonic jet, and was off to New York's John F. Kennedy Airport. Thanks to the 5-hour time difference between London and New York and the speedy 5-hour flight of the Concorde, Phil landed at just about the same time he took off. Then he hopped into a waiting helicopter and rushed to Philadelphia, where he arrived in plenty of time to play drums and sing with Eric Clapton, and also once again sing Against All Odds. He became the first person in history to perform in both Europe and North America on the same day. And why did Phil do it? Well, he says, quote, "I'm a lunatic. I must be. I don't know why I'm doing this. Somebody just put up the idea, and I thought I'd do it." This week, this jet setter's jet setter is at number 13 in our survey. Here's Phil Collins with his latest, Don't Lose My Number. Don't lose my number, 'cause you're not anywhere I can find you. Phil Collins on American Top 40. His last song went to number 1, Sussudio. This one moves from 19 to 13, 5th week in the countdown. As the countdown continues.
Casey's Coast to Coast.
This is American Top 40 and Shadoe Stevens. Next is the singing star from England who appeared in 2 movies 24 years apart. He made his first movie in 1964 with the Beatles. It was the movie A Hard Day's Night. He didn't exactly co-star with the Beatles. He didn't even have any lines. I mean, he was just a kid. He was about 13 years old. He was one of thousands of screaming Beatle fans in the crowd scenes chasing the Fab Four all over London. So it wasn't a sparkling cinematic debut, but it was the first time Phil Collins ever appeared in a film. And it's taken him 24 years to make his second film. This time, Phil has a juicier part. He plays the lead in a movie called Buster. It's the true story of some English train robbers. In the 1960s, they robbed an English mail train and sort of became folk heroes. Phil plays one of those robbers named Ronald Edwards, whose nickname is Buster. But the story is not really about the train robbery. It's about the relationship between Buster and his wife. I don't want to give away the rest of the plot because it is a new movie. But anyway, Phil Collins' latest hit is a song he sings in the soundtrack of Buster. At number 16 this week, here's the recent number 1, A Groovy Kind of Love.
When I'm feeling blue, we got a groovy kind of love.
A Groovy Kind of Love. The Mindbenders took it to number 2 back in 1966, and Phil Collins took it to number 1 just a few weeks ago. Now it falls 9 notches to number 16.
Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. We're getting closer and closer to number 1. Now we're up to the latest hit for a superstar who puts a lot of his own life into his songs. So much, in fact, that his former wife once sued him for royalties. Like most artists, when it comes to writing his songs, Phil Collins draws on his own personal experiences. Nothing unusual about that. John Lennon, for instance, wrote Penny Lane based on a street near where he grew up. Madonna co-wrote Keep It Together about her family. And in the case of Phil Collins, most of his first solo album, Face Value, came from the things he felt as his first marriage started falling apart. The album was filled with songs about miscommunication and a sense of impending doom. Songs with meaningful titles like Behind the Lines and If Leaving Me Is Easy. The album was an unexpected hit when it came out in 1981, and it produced 2 top 40 hits, I Missed Again and In the Air Tonight. Well, when Phil's former wife heard the album, she wasn't exactly thrilled. She felt Phil had used things that happened between them in his lyrics without asking her permission. And she sued him for a portion of the royalties the album earned, claiming that since the lyrics were about her life, she deserved a part of the profits. In time, the suit was dismissed, but it left Phil amazed and shaken. And not surprisingly, it gave him material for one more song about his dealings with his ex-wife. A song on his next solo album titled, I Cannot Believe It's True. Phil's happily remarried these days, but he's still writing personal songs about the ups and downs of love. This one's about a man who's fighting to keep a love alive. A man who sadly says, you don't know what you've got till you lose it. Climbing 3 notches to number 7 on Casey's Top 40, here's Phil Collins with Something Happened on the Way to Heaven. Last week it was at number 10. This week, Phil Collins' 14th top 10 as a solo artist climbs 3 notches to number 7. That's Something Happened on the Way to Heaven.
Casey's Top 40.
Well, now we're up to the song Every Day, and it's by a veteran superstar who's now practically a one-man supergroup. The man is Phil Collins, and Phil's latest album, Both Sides, just may be a first in rock history. The first time a major superstar has created an album entirely by himself. A few legendary performers have come quite close. Back in the 70s, Stevie Wonder showed his genius by singing, writing, and playing nearly all the music on classic albums like Talking Book, Inner Visions, and Fulfillingness First Finale. But on some cuts, Stevie had a bit of instrumental and vocal help, and some of the songs were co-written with others. In 1981, Steve Winwood proved his genius by creating nearly everything on his album, Arc of a Diver. Steve did all the performing and producing on it, but used other writers' lyrics. More recently, Prince has proved to be a one-man wonder. He's able to disappear into a studio and come out with a finished product he's written, produced, and performed all by himself. But once again, when it comes to complete albums, he's always had some kind of outside help. And that's what makes Phil Collins' album so unique. The entire CD, Both Sides, was written, played, produced, and performed without any help at all. In fact, Phil was so determined to do this album alone, he turned down help offered by his close friends Bruce Hornsby and David Crosby. Phil said thanks, but no thanks. This week, the second big hit from that truly solo CD climbs 5 notches to number 33 on Casey's Top 40. Here's Phil Collins with Every Day. Jumping 5 notches to number 33, that's Phil Collins with his 20th Top 40 hit as a solo artist, Every Day. 10 years ago this week, the number 1 song in the USA was Karma Chameleon by Culture Club. Who'll be number 1 this week? We're on our way to the answer as the countdown rolls on.
Casey's Top 40.